Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Find Your Model Health, the official podcast for those looking to optimize their long-term health goals. And I'm very happy to bring back Dr. Lloyd Glauberman. He was on just a few weeks ago with us, and we had an amazing conversation about mindset and psychotherapy and how it probably is the most important part of starting any journey, especially a health journey. But I wanted to have Dr. Glauberman back on because he's really smart and he's got a lot of really interesting things to say. So if you haven't met him already, he's a Manhattan-based psychotherapist who focuses on stress management and behavior change, anxiety and mood disorders. And he does have a new app out, which we'll get to in a while, that I've looked at, I downloaded, I've been listening to some of your stuff. I want to talk on what I, shall we say, discovered in your app, Dr. Glauberman, but welcome back.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. And
So
I feel all this pressure. I have to be smart all over again. I don't know whether I can do this twice in a couple of weeks, but I'll give it the best I got. All right.
I'm sure you'll be fine. So I wanted to have you back on because I think you've got a lot more to say, and I think it's really interesting. So before we started recording, we were talking about how we and everyone else, even children, feel like time is just speeding up. Is it really? Why is it? And I had mentioned to you that I came across a study about 2 years ago in one of the physics journals that mentioned, yes, time is in fact speeding up, but only by zero point 0.3 milliseconds per minute. So almost nothing. Yet I feel like I'm losing 2 hours every day. And some days I don't know my ass from my elbow. I'm like, I can't get anything done. Where is all the time gone? It's bedtime again. And you mentioned maybe it's the anxiety. So let's continue that.
It's I'm as confused as everybody. I know as you get older, because there's less time in your life, you can understand that time would seem like it's going faster, but that's a normal curve.
Mhm.
Kids have a long life in front of them, so things are slower. But as you get older and you get into 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you realize that most of your life is over. So each day seems to go faster because you know there's less going on. But it would make sense that given all the things that are going on in our lives right now, and you and I were talking about from global warming to all of these issues having to do with the state of the country and all the people involved and all the issues that involve that generates a lot of anxiety. When you have anxiety, things start to move faster inside of you. Your heart moves, beats a little bit faster. All kinds of things are moving at a different speed. So it might very well be that background anxiety that causes our minds to experience the movement of time differently than it would typically
Yeah.
experience it. Now,
It,
I have no idea whether this is correct or not, and I would no idea how one would go about trying to do research to find that out, because this is all speculative at this point. But everybody seems to be saying the same thing, so it's safe to say this is a cultural wide or universal experience of what's happening right now.
mm. It would make sense if, well, humans in ourselves were made up of energy. Everything is made up of energy that on a global level, if everybody's emitting this energy of anxiety and faster frequency, that it is affecting our time and space.
Hmm.
Like you said, this is just speculation right now, but it's super interesting. And there is a lot of talk about the Earth's energy and up-leveling your frequency and all that lately. And one thing I've been craving a lot that's not sugar is just stopping, sitting in silence, just slowing down. I can't seem to find enough time to do that, but I
Hmm.
crave that having nothing to do, even for an hour. And maybe that is part of leading on from our conversation last time, why people are struggling so much. We all have so much to do, it seems.
That plus our own lives obviously are the centerpiece of everything, but there are so many things to worry about in our environment right now. There is so much conflict, so much worry, so many unusual things, so many things we can't predict in terms of what the outcomes will be. Especially right now in this country, there's a whole bunch of things bubbling around, and we have no idea in what direction things are going to be going. So if you're not anxious about these things, something's wrong. Because anxiety at a certain point is normal, right? It's to the extent of what you have that it becomes dysfunctional.
Yeah.
But being depressed sometimes, given a certain set of circumstances, that makes sense, right? There's a normalcy to virtually all of our experience. It's to what degree it's happening that can cause things to be labeled as dysfunctional, and you need some assistance or help with that.
Yeah.
A little bit of anxiety. Who wouldn't want to take an exam with no anxiety whatsoever? You
Well,
wouldn't do very well. You
yeah.
need that little bit of a charge to make sure you perform optimally. That's across the board in virtually anything. So all of these things that we typically think are bad are not. It's to what degree they
Yeah.
exist.
Are some of us maybe blowing it out of proportion? I
Mhm.
wonder, how do you think this is affecting people's personalities? Do you think it's making people more argumentative? So then, if they're in the office or in the school or wherever they are at work, and then they're already on edge, and now they're a bit more sensitive to what maybe someone else says in passing, even if it was meaningless, and and that's where things blow up even more because the personality has changed and now you're more sensitive and not as resilient when it comes to these potential stressors.
You bring up an interesting point, and it's anger is an interesting emotion only because of the fact that it's multidimensional.
Mm,
There are times when, obviously, something happens and you are justifiably upset, leading to being angry, right? If somebody says something to you that's insulting, if somebody betrays you, all of those things allow you to be, and here's the key word, justifiably angry.
mm,
But a lot of times, anger is a cover emotion for other emotional states that you're having trouble dealing with. Two of them stand out. One of them, we were just talking about before, anxiety. Anxiety is an uncomfortable emotion. And when it reaches a certain level, you kind of want to discharge it. But how do you discharge anxiety? I mean, you can go out and exercise, that would help. But most people are not going to be able to do that when they would want to most of the time. So what happens? You morph it into anger by choosing something you feel justifiably you can be angry about and
yeah.
get angry at that person or situation and let it out, thinking that you're really angry about it, but it's the anxiety underneath that's fueling it.
Mm,
The other thing that is equally as difficult to deal with, maybe more so, is guilt. That's a really troublesome thing for all of us. Now, if we understand what we're guilty about and we go and apologize for what it is, it's closed and done. But a lot of people have trouble doing that. So what happens? The guilt has to be discharged because it's so uncomfortable. Again, it will morph just like anger. Well, I'm sorry, just like anxiety, it will morph into anger to get the energy out of your system. A lot of times people are completely unaware of that process. Anger covers for guilt and anxiety. Like not all the time, but enough times so that everybody listening right now will be aware of when they do it because they're listening to this probably for the first time.
I actually thought you were going to say the second option was going to be insecurity. So would that
That
fall into guilt?
insecurity could be in and of itself. No, that's excellent. That's actually an emotional state that because it makes you feel bad and you don't like that feeling, you want to get rid of that. So you go the opposite direction and attack.
Yeah.
Yes, that's excellent. That's a third emotional state that fits this paradigm of I'm uncomfortable. I will use anger to deal with this. Yes.
Because I know if I'm feeling insecure, then I'll get to the next level. I'll start feeling anxious. And then my next level is to lash out or lose my temper. But
I
on,
will guess right now, everybody who's listening to us has just had a movie of one of these experiences flit across the screen of their consciousness.
hmm,
Let's hope so. They
Yeah.
will have learned something. So the next time it comes up, they will be aware of the core emotion and figure out a way to deal with that in a different kind of way.
So what comes under the guilt? Is that a guilt like, oh no, I've done something bad, I shouldn't have done that? Or is that a guilt that I feel so bad, I'm failing at blah blah blah?
It would typically have to do with somebody else, not you disappoint yourself because you're aware of that,
Okay.
but it would be something interactive with another person.
Yeah. So for me, you said with the anxiety, the first, what would you do? Well, obviously, we'd like everyone to exercise. Something we spoke about a lot last time, it was sleep. When I'm anxious, I know if I have a good night's sleep, that will be gone, mostly gone by the next morning.
Sleep is the single most important thing we do,
Mm.
unequivocally. Most people don't put sleep in that kind of category because of its sleep. But when you think about all the connections to virtually every activity, internally and externally, sleep is the linchpin that keeps everything together and allows you to be at your best. And it also maintains your appetite in a good place because you're not you're not undersleeping, needing more food, so your brain generates needing more calories, so you believe that you're hungry when you're actually not. All those kinds of things. Sleep is ideal. So if for those people who are not getting enough, make sure you figure out ways to help that along.
I was in the gym this morning, as I do, as some guy just randomly came up to me, and I know him from the gym, and he's seen my gains, as we say. And he said, do you mind me asking? You seem to have gained a lot lately, like my physique has changed. He said, what would you say is the one thing that you do that has helped you change your physique so much in the last few months? And I'm sure he thought I was going to say, well, this supplement or protein or whatever. And I immediately said, the one thing is sleep. I'm in bed at 8:30 every night. It's sleep. And then I'm up at 6 a.m. No matter what, the weekends, unless I'm going out to a celebration or something, I am consistent. And anyone who's ever asked me that in the past, any bodybuilders in that industry who want to get those extra gains, you've got to look at your sleep. If you're not sleeping,
What was his response? I would imagine he was clearly surprised.
well, you know what he said? So I said, yeah, 8:30 every night, no matter what. And I said, my little boy, who's 12, he's in
Mhm.
bed at 7:30 every night. And some nights he doesn't like it, but most of the times he's okay because he's tired and he enjoys his sleep and he wants to feel good. He knows my little boy, I've trained him to know that when he's exhausted, he will get anxious. So he'll start thinking there's scary things in the closet or something. And he knows it's his mind, or he'll feel nauseous. And I will also feel nauseous if I get too tired. But this guy said to me, oh, I wish I could do that. And I immediately said, but you could if you really wanted to.
Sure, why not? I mean, what's stopping you, right?
Exactly.
Probably playing around with the internet.
Well,
So,
that's it because I know his children are like 4 and 5. So they're already in bed at that stage, or they should be. So, and then that came back to something I heard you saying, because he said, well, that's my me time in the evening, which everyone says. And I was like, well, Dr. Lloyd Glauberman says that all day is your me time, but you have the whole day for me time, and how you use your day is your me time. So there's perspective, and then there's also the excuses we give ourselves.
yeah, and people, we are notorious for being able to bull bleep ourselves, if you know
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
I mean. Humans do that better than anything else. We can con ourselves and make up stories for justifying virtually anything.
Yeah.
And it's really important to be able to realize you're doing that. So when something important comes up, you begin to say, wait, 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 I can't go in that direction. I'm not going to use that old program anymore. I'm going to do what's most important, most useful, most valuable for me at this moment in time. Yeah, that was an interesting thing. You basically did not give him what he wanted. He wanted some muscle activity that
You
he could
wanted
do
some,
to have
yeah,
the same gains that you had.
Yeah,
And
well, sorry, but no. Wait, and then we continued the conversation for a bit, but I had mentioned, and I mentioned this a few times, there obviously are certain personalities that are more driven and more focused, and it seems to be a small percentage of the population overall, but there are some of us, and I always try to remember that
Mhm.
I am more driven than a lot of other people. And going back to my own story, remember I told you about my weight loss, and I obviously had that fire in me to keep going. I was using the darkness to fuel me to keep going, and I suppose I still do. But because of what you do and with the psychotherapy over the years, what have you seen in what I'm saying, like personalities, different personalities? Surely you've came across a lot of personalities that you say that person's on fire. They're highly driven. They're going to hit their goals or whatever. And then other people you can sense maybe a softer personality.
So when somebody comes in and you sense that they have some talent, but they don't quite know how to get there, utilize it, then you do various structured activities, cognitive activities to get them to begin to see, hear, and feel what it would be like if they began to expand the possibilities of how to get from here to there. Right? Most people can do more than they realize.
Mhm.
And sometimes while you're doing that, stuff from their past will come up, which you can then weave into the fabric of, oh, do you understand how, as a consequence of that event, this took place after that and then got stuck in the background so you didn't notice it anymore? So you have to weave in a variety of different things, new strategies, historical events, get a little bit of success going so you have some momentum, and then you can get people into a place where they can actualize themselves. Not an easy task, and not everybody's capable of doing it, but most people are capable of making some changes.
But there's obviously personalities that you're like, oh, this will be easy. They already have that fire in their belly and they're pretty motivated.
Typically, people who have that watched it growing up. They had one parent, maybe both parents. And when you see something day in and day out, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, you're going to learn it. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Hopefully, you saw the good stuff, more good stuff than the junk. Every family always has its problems, and you're gonna get some stuff stuck in your head that wasn't that useful. Hopefully, you'll be able to understand that and see it literally in your head at some point, going, "Oh, now I can make that connection." Therapy should be both, but for people who are lucky enough to have parents who were really assertive and went after life, they learned it. It's part of who they are. It's like breathing. You don't know anything else. You're
How
you're a person like that, right?
how important is it for us in the context of kids to lead by example? Because of course I get asked about kids' nutrition and supplements all the time, and I'm worried about my child. They don't eat very well, or blah blah. I always say, all you can do is lead by example. That's all we can do.
That's singularly the gift that you want to give your kids
Hmm.
is to be the role model so that day in and day out, they see you doing all the things that are useful to maintain their health,
Yeah.
right? If you do that, that will be in their heads. You don't have to tell them because you're displaying it, you're modeling it. They can see you doing it consistently. The probability is they will begin to do that, as opposed to you not doing it and telling them what they should be doing. If you're
Yeah.
doing stuff that's not good for you, if you're eating junk, if you're not sleeping well, you're spending a lot of time doing social media and all that kind of stuff, what are they going to do? Exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, they
So
were.
model it,
Mm.
right? That's the best gift you can give your kid because not only will you be taking care of yourself and being the role model for them, but as you get older, I mean really older, they won't have to worry as much about taking care of you because you will be living a healthier, longer life without needing any assistance. That's a really nice gift to give your kids
Oh,
without ever having to say anything about it and without labeling it as such. But it is.
mm.
It's a wonderful gift.
That's what I say to my clients is like, just because your child doesn't say anything or they don't pass comment on your habits does not mean that somewhere in there it's being ingrained in them. And when the time is right, it will come back. And those habits are already instilled.
They will have, there's a movie in their head of you doing all these things, right? And they'll see how well you took care of yourself, right? And then they're going to look around and see the contrast with other people who didn't do that. And they'll realize, wow, mom did it right. And I know how to do that, right?
And also, I'm going to add, mom might have been a bitch sometimes, but it was for my own good.
No, nobody's perfect. You know what I
Sometimes
mean?
you do have to, I mean, of course, I'm an Irish mother. Irish mothers are a certain way. And
Hmm.
sometimes you do have to be hard and cruel to be kind. I'm constantly saying you might not like what I'm saying or doing right now, but it's for your own good. They
Hmm.
just don't realize it.
When they get older, they'll look back
Yeah.
and say, no, you were right. And well, those kind of things always happen, and that's a wonderful moment when
Yeah.
it happens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, So, what do you think then, while we're just on this topic, what do you think? Clearly, a lot of our younger people and even children are struggling lately. There's a lot of mental health stuff going on. What do you think of people who, not people, but there is a saying going around that it is the parents' fault why a lot of our children and teenagers are suffering and struggling so much right now. Do you think there's any validity to that?
I think that's being a little bit unfair to parents
Mm,
because the entire culture has been revolutionized in a way that is not that useful.
yeah.
We don't go years ago. I mean, I grew up in the 50s and the 60s. So I went out into the world every day to
Mm,
do stuff. Now, because of the web, computers, phones, now the world comes to us. We don't go anywhere. So most of our interactions now have to do with screens and messaging and emailing and creating artificial conceptions of ourselves online. That kind of stuff changes everything.
yeah.
It's a different world. We used to have, I don't know whether I mentioned this last time because it's a concept that is both funny and very serious. And that we used to have self-esteem. Self-esteem was built upon interactions with other people. Now we have selfie esteem. We have
Yes.
an artificially created self that's on a screen, and then we love when people like and follow us and all that kind of stupid stuff that people do. That's a whole lot different than life as it was and like real human experience. There's so much less of that now. And that is what influences kids more than anything. And that's a cultural thing. It's not like a family thing. It's way beyond that. And what do we do with this thing? Right?
Mm.
It's like the monster is out of
The
running
cage
loose.
and he's not going back in. I
No, no.
agree with you. The internet and it can be both good and bad. Of course, there's a lot of pros. It allows me and you to build a relationship like this and
Hmm.
somewhat of a real relationship, I would say. And there's a lot of pros. We can help people. But there's a lot of poison on the internet. There's a lot of, dare I say, evil, and it's just creeping in spaces we don't see it.
Virtually every day you hear a news story about something crazy that's happened, some illegals, inappropriate sort of thing that has taken place with information or images and stuff like that. And there's so much of it because it's so easy to utilize, to use this that way, that reality as a concept almost doesn't exist anymore. We don't have a reality. We have multiple layers and levels of it, and it's scary.
And that's back to how it's affecting us as a society. You probably can pick up on my personality. I'm quite thick-skinned, as we say. I'm
Mhm.
pretty confident in myself and in different settings. But with, like you mentioned, certain things on the internet, certain images and stuff, I get very sensitive. I can't even fathom how certain things can be done in those images or whatever. And that almost hurts me. That's where I don't like certain that side of the internet at all.
There's a lot of it that's spooky right now.
Yeah.
And it's going to get even spookier when all the artificial intelligence stuff continues to evolve in ways that not a single person can predict at this moment in time. So that you'll be looking at things that don't exist at all, and you'd swear, wait a minute, you're telling me that this has all been created? Like you and me talking, can be a version of that where two artificially created people that look exactly like us and now having a conversation, and we'll go, what is going on here? Right?
No, and that is scary that we won't know the difference between reality and AI, and that could lead anywhere. That's just so crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's like there used to be, well, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Did you see the
Yeah.
film?
Yeah.
Yeah, like how the computer takes over, right?
Mhm.
And back when that first came out, everybody thought, well, that's never going to happen. Come on, how stupid is that? It was a great film, and that was a great character, but nobody thought, come on. But now, oh my goodness, that's a lock.
Yeah.
Hal's going to be around,
Yeah.
and his grandchildren are going to be even crazier than him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think for people like myself and yourself, and I'm quite resilient, and I like to think that I'm on some level intelligent and can think things through and recognize danger and whatnot. And if I'm and yourself, we're concerned about it, what about other people who maybe aren't as resilient as us or able to perceive danger as well as us? What's going to happen there?
Will be able to be manipulated in ways that are unimaginable because they won't have enough doubt to be able to look at something and have that feeling and go, wait a minute, something's wrong here. I have to proceed with caution. I mean, as we have seen recently in this country, sometimes people show them a light, they follow it anywhere. We've just seen variations on that theme, and it's scary.
Yeah, like squirrel, look over here, look over there, that kind of thing. Oh, crazy. Well, we can just hope for the best. And
Mhm.
I wanted to go back. If you remember our conversation the last time, I was telling you about, you asked about my weight loss journey and my trigger, and I had mentioned there was a lot of pain associated with my journey. There still is. I think it's going to be with me forever. I can almost feel the scars. They've somewhat healed, but they're definitely in there still.
Nothing, no matter how effective any kind of self-realizations or therapy are, they will never take away everything. There
Mhm.
will always be a little bit of what you didn't like still there. But
Yeah.
you want it to be there because it reminds you of where you were. You wouldn't want to have amnesia for
Yeah.
these things, but you want to have control over them, which obviously you do have and have done that very well.
That's it, those emotions and feeling and remembering the pain. It's like it keeps the fire tindering just enough to keep me going.
Mhm.
Um, but before I lost the weight, when I was bullied and everything, it was a pain that's unexplainable. It's a heartache. It's a desire not to commit suicide, but for everything to just stop. I just didn't have the ability to not only understand where I was in the world and who I was and what I was feeling, but I also didn't have the tools and the capability to deal with the pain at the time I was dealing with. So I would turn to food and I would lock myself in my room. I would
You would distance yourself through the padding of your body.
Yeah, and so I would go out late at night when nobody was around and I would get takeout and eat in my car. And I was using food a lot for that comfort and to get that dopamine hit and not heal the pain, but mask the pain. And then obviously I did a 360 and I found other tools to heal the pain and mask the pain. But my experience working with women, especially nowadays, women were very emotional creatures. As you know, some might say we're pretty crazy at times. But a lot of women, I believe, are in pain. And this is where a lot of struggles are using food for the again, I don't want to say for the healing, for masking the pain, just soothe it a little bit.
Food is the drug that is used the most to deal with emotional difficulties.
Hmm.
It's always available, and it's not a drug, but it is. When it's used that way, it's used to calm you down.
Hmm.
And it can be very useful that way, but it's got some byproducts.
Yeah.
Right? It's that you get bigger and bigger.
Well, it's the chronic use, isn't it? Like
Sure.
anything in the short term, sometimes I might still have a bad day. I'm like, oh my God, I just need a glass of wine or something. And that just helps you get through that bad day. But it's the chronic use. It's not really looking at yourself and that pain. Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. Well, at the time, all you're thinking about is, I need to block the pain.
Mhm.
There is no other conversation going on. Everything else is shut down. I'm hurting. I need to stop hurting. This is the way to do it. I have a ritual. This is what I eat. This is where I go. This is how I calm down. Okay. But you managed to, with just using your own skill and determination, you managed to get out of that all by yourself.
Mhm.
Do you know how unusual that is?
I I do know. And
I know
that's
how
what
you,
concerns me. I do know.
well, but that meant that's a tribute to you.
But
You're
it
you're
also tells me as well the amount of people that do go the long haul is minute. And that concerns me when I'm thinking of helping everyone. It's a small percentage of people that go gung ho, as we say, and stick with it.
you probably are helping more people than you realize. You
Mhm.
might not know a lot of them, but people who are listening to you and know your story and like who you are and the way you go about living your life right now, you might, without ever knowing it, be a role model for hundreds of women right now
Mhm.
who look at you and say, "Well, you know what? I like her. I like what she did, and I'm beginning to feel empowered to do this as a consequence of you telling your story." My guess is that's probably happened a number of times.
It has, but I do hope it helps more people. That's probably why I'm so outspoken.
Well, you've got the show going, so more and more people are going to be listening, and this issue is obviously the biggest, no pun intended, issue in the country,
Yeah.
right? As we all know. I
Mhm.
mean, the speculation now in the next 20 years we'll have 260 million people who are obese. I mean, it's getting to the point where it's bizarre.
That's what
Absolutely.
I'm scared of. Is yeah, when we look at the actual science, not just speculation here, says only 5% of people stay the long term and keep the weight off and stay healthy. That's insane.
The hardest part to being successful is not getting there. It's staying there
It's
because
maintenance, yeah.
because the whole psychological process to that point is I'm losing weight, I'm losing more. Look how much weight. There was always a place to get to,
Mm,
place to go after, right? It was a number. But once you get there, you're there. What do you do when you are now there? Staying there, totally different set of variables in your head, right? Because now it's every day you have to deal with it. It's not strung out over time. Okay, I've reached this goal. Now I'm going to get to that goal where you can see things out into the future. And that's what pulls you towards. No, now it's a whole different thing, which is why so many people have trouble once they've lost their weight because they don't have the strategy, the cognitive strategy to know what it means to stay in this moment and deal with every day. You have to come up with a strategy
mhm.
for that day. It
Yeah,
doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, it's still the next day you have to do something.
yeah.
You have to, right. And people don't get that until they're there. And think about it, everybody, there's a whole bunch of people listening to us right now, and they're all thinking, yeah, that was part of what screwed me up. Yeah, I had this thing going, and then I got there, and then what do I do now when I'm there?
Yeah.
You have to
That
have a
is
different
part
kind.
of what I do with people. I do speak about what's What's the diet after the diet? What do we do next? But that is, that cliche term that we hear all the time, like it has to be a lifestyle. And people throw around that term so willy-nilly. Obviously, it's true, but I don't actually think it sinks in. This is for the rest of your life. This is forever. If you really want it, it's for forever and ever and ever.
People forget, and for good reason, because they didn't have the cognitive development, that when you're born and you're an infant, you knew when you were hungry, you knew when you were tired, you knew when you needed to move around. You didn't have to think about it. You didn't know, God, am I full? Should I stop eating? I mean, everything, once an infant is full and the bottle's there, the kid will push the bottle away, right? Well, that's what people need to remember. Pay attention to the sensory experience that they were born with. If you do that, you'll know how to do this right, because it all boils down to paying attention to, like I said before, sensations of fatigue, hunger, right? And
So that brings me to something else in my journey. Failure for me was not an option. I never thought I was going to fail. It just didn't cross my mind. I was focused. I knew what was happening. And even now, I don't have fear of failure. I believe I could do something else. If it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. I'm capable of anything. So where does fear come into this? Where it's impeding people from moving forward?
people don't want to fail. So sometimes not trying something is less difficult to deal with than trying something and failing. Right? Because if once you get into doing something and there's some changes in who you are, then you have to deal with the feedback from people in your environment, which, by the way, is no easy task. If you hang out with a bunch of people and everybody's in the same physical shape, and maybe let's assume that they're not taking really good care of themselves, and you start doing things to alter your appearance and basically saying, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm going to do it differently. Everybody else that you're friends with in that little coterie of people, they're not going to be happy. Right? You don't want to lose too much weight. You can get sick. You hear all kinds of crazy stuff. That doesn't make any sense, but that's because people get threatened really easily if you start changing things that they know they should be changing.
Do you
One's family of origin will also be very difficult to deal with if you decide that you're not going to go along with the family plan anymore and you're going to do these things that will change your appearance and make you healthier, and everybody else stays and continues what they're doing, they're not going to be happy.
See, I struggle to understand how real of a fear is that people care so much what their peers or their family thinks that it is going to influence their choices. And I struggle because that's not me. So I struggle to understand how people allow others to influence them like that.
You mean how people get influenced by their environment so they stop doing what they should be doing?
Yeah, so back to fear, you start losing weight, you're changing your habits, and now all of a sudden your close circle of friends have a couple of things to say about that, and now you're afraid of upsetting them or making them feel uncomfortable because of your actions.
Well, you've made them feel uncomfortable because you're doing the things that they should be doing.
Mhm.
So they're going to try to maneuver you so you stop doing that to bring you back into the herd so that they're not feeling guilty and inadequate anymore,
Mhm.
that they're not doing what they should be doing, and therefore everything's okay. No, they will do everything. They will make you feel emotions that are really uncomfortable.
Do you think that makes a difference? Like, does it work? Does it actually stop people from
Sometimes,
progressing?
oh, sometimes it will. Sometimes people will value realizing that they believe that their friends are not going to be friends with them anymore because they're being criticized more, not only for what they're doing in terms of changing their body, but they'll criticize them for other things too, just because they want to make them feel really bad. So they'll stop doing what they're doing health-wise, and then they'll be nice to them again. People don't want to lose their friends.
That's that insecurity, and people
Yeah.
are afraid to be alone. What do you think about that? Just while it just came to my head. Do you think there's a real fear of loneliness in the population?
I think everybody has a fear of being abandoned. And if you have a core bunch of folks who are part of your friendship, friendships, and you begin doing things that are different from what they're doing, and you begin to change and look better, and they're going to feel resentful
Mm.
and jealous. And that's a difficult combination to cope with, especially if you're the only person doing it. Now, if you continue doing what you're doing, my guess is eventually they will come to you and ask for help how they can do this as well.
Mhm.
That's, it takes a while to get to that place, but you have to maintain your balance and know what's going on so that you know the underlying themes here. And it's not just they've changed their opinions about you as a person, it's that they're having a hard time metabolizing what you have done to change your appearance and your lifestyle. This is nothing gets more difficult than something like that.
Yeah, it really is like an all-around journey. It's not just the nutrition and the health, it's at the same time keeping your awareness, keeping your faith that it's going to work, building your confidence. Like there's so many moving parts that you have to keep an eye on each day. It's not just showing up in the kitchen or the gym, it's that constant inner talk that I have every single day.
But it works for you. You need that. That keeps you going.
Back
You've
in
done
Ireland, when I was growing up, if you back in like the 90s, you if you saw someone walking down the road before we had headphones and they were talking to themselves, that was usually a sign that they were crazy and someone would pass comment and look the other way. Now I talk to myself a lot and I'm like, no, I'm not crazy. I have to keep myself in line. There's a lot of self-talk. Sometimes I'm almost two different people and I have to pull myself back in.
Self-talk is an interesting concept. I mean, there are therapies built around cognitive activity and the things you're saying to yourself. But do you want to know a very unusual piece of information?
Yes.
That
Always.
it's a different thing. It's a health-related thing, but it kind of ties everything together in terms of the stuff that people have in their heads. Okay, everybody's had the following experience. You're eating your meal, and all of a sudden you get food caught in your throat,
Hmm.
right? And you start, right? Okay. Now, most of the time, it's benign and it doesn't get to the point when somebody has to perform the Heimlich maneuver on you, right? So I've had that happen to me. I'm old, so how many thousands of times during the course of your life have you had it happen? When I was in my 50s, one day I was having conversation. I was really upset about something, and I was talking in my head to somebody, right? While I happened to be eating something simultaneously. And then suddenly food was caught in my throat, and I went through the whole thing coughing. And then I said, wait a minute, something weird. I noticed, okay, you were talking in your head. And then I monitored every time that happened to me from that moment on.
Mm.
And here's what I figured out. When you're eating and you start talking to yourself, your windpipe, the trachea, mimics your breathing so that if you were talking out loud, you would be taking a breath at certain times. The trachea mimics that this microscopic movement of your trachea while you're talking in your head. So you are literally kind of breathing along in your head to the way you would be breathing if you were talking out loud. And then food can get sucked right in and you start going through the motions of getting it out of your throat. And the reason why nobody ever remembers what went on is because this getting food caught in your throat is potentially a life-threatening situation. You have complete amnesia for it.
Hmm.
I've been searching the internet trying to find evidence of this that I know exists. Right? It's not there, but this is actually real. Next time, everybody listening right now is going to have this event occur at some point. And then as a consequence of hearing this, they'll think back, was I just talking in my head? And the probability is with absolute certainty, yes. So while you're eating and because I remember this happened when I was really angry at somebody. So the whole thing was exaggerated much more than
Hmm.
typical conversation. If you're angry while you're eating, be careful
Well,
because that's gonna happen. That's just thing.
the
Isn't that
reason I
weird?
have this silly smile on my face as you're talking, before you even said anger, this happened to me the other day, and it's happened a few times where I'm eating my breakfast by myself, but I have a negative thought in my head about someone and I start choking. And I immediately, every time I go, sorry, God, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have that negative thought. Like almost funny, like he's telling me, don't have a negative thought or we're going to choke you out. And it's happened a few times, but always when I'm having, like, someone's annoying me or I'm having a negative thought.
We all do self-talking all the time, but we do it so often that it's almost invisible because it's always there.
Yeah.
But this is one moment in time where it poses a little bit of danger. Okay. So everybody listening right now has a little bit of extra knowledge,
Yeah.
right? Going. So be careful. If you're really upset, that means you're going to be talking in your head. And if you're eating that windpipe,
Mhm.
the only thing is, how do you research this thing? Because it's such a difficult thing to do because you'd be putting people at risk
You'd
to
need
do
a
that.
huge case study, wouldn't you? I don't know. I don't know. But if it's not that, it basically means that God is angry with you for having a bad thought and he's trying to give you a warning.
I don't think
That's
so.
really before I had no idea you were going to say that, but that is my experience with it. Isn't that uncanny?
Everybody listening right now, forever, for the rest of their life, will remember this part of our conversation, right? Especially because everybody has food caught in their throat every so often, and they will think back and say, wow, I really was having a conversation with somebody.
Yeah,
Right.
because we've all choked on food when we've been speaking at the same time. But
You
wouldn't
mean speaking out
recognize it
loud?
as much when we're not actually speaking, which does happen to me. And I'm like, how does this even happen?
Now you know.
Yeah.
The larynx opens up rhythmically, mimicking the the rhythm of your breathing if you were saying these things out loud.
Mm.
That's what happens. My
But
my 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 wife and I have an ongoing thing that whenever it happens to the other, so if this happens to me when I'm with my wife, she immediately turns to me and says, "Who are you talking to?" Now, if anybody else are listening to, watching us or listening, they'll say, "What is she talking about? He wasn't talking to anybody, right?" But it's just part of our lifestyle now because we figured this thing out.
the body is just so amazing that it's very hard to even comprehend when you really think about it. Obviously, what I do, a lot of my focus is on hormones as well. And just thinking like the body was designed to have this hormone signal this and to activate this. And there's just so much going on that it's so hard to comprehend how amazing the human body is, and everything was put together so perfectly.
We are each of us is the universe we created. And I mean that right from the beginning, right? The universe, that single cell explosion into the universe. How did we start? Sperm met egg, formed a single cell, and then exploded into us 35 and a half trillion cells later. We are all miraculous.
Yeah. To
Yeah.
even fathom the universe and its size and all its details, I just can't. And because of that, I can't fathom how amazing the body is. I just know it's amazing.
Yeah, we take ourselves for granted, but there are our brains and bodies are just as amazing. Well, as remarkable as anything in the universe,
Mhm.
right?
So let's
Uh,
get into hypnosis before we wrap up. So part of your practice over the years was helping people through hypnosis. Most
mhm.
people know hypnosis as in you'd go see a show and someone would call you up on the stage and get you to act like a chicken or something funny.
That's stage hypnosis. Most hypnosis, people who do this really well, try to get somebody into a state where they're basically not listening because they're so relaxed and calm and things are so, and then structure messages by marking out words by either speaking them a little bit more slowly and then pick up the pace a little bit. You just carve things out. So the messages bypass consciousness but are processed by people's unconscious minds. That's hypnosis at its best. It's not telling somebody to act like a dog and start barking. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with introducing information without somebody being aware of it, which can be done without the formal etiquette of hypnosis, without somebody sitting down and lying down. You can do trance in a conversational setting and be just as effective, but people just don't notice it and don't experience it that way. But you can influence people that way if you set things up, get them in a relaxed state, and then talk about things and mark out certain words.
So you were doing this in your office at one
Mhm,
stage. How
mhm.
effective was it in the world of weight loss and health? How effective was that?
Well, it depends on the person. If that's what they're interested in doing, the whole idea would be eat less, move more,
Yeah.
sleep more. So the whole idea would be focusing on those kinds of things. And typically, I mean, not everybody responds well, and not everybody's as serious as other people. But the people who came in were very serious tended to have positive outcomes.
So
And it all comes down to how long you're willing to you need to be frustrated a little bit along the way and deal with those moments in time to know that you're going to be able to do something successfully because nothing is a straight line.
Mm.
That's when people get upset because if they lose a bunch of weight, they lose 20 pounds, they gain 5 pounds, instead of thinking, oh my God, I lost 5 pounds. Hey, you lost 15 pounds. The ebb and flow is going the right way. Now you're going to learn one of life's most important concepts, resilience.
Mhm.
And resilience can only be learned when you have a setback and have some difficulty.
Mhm.
So those kinds of things have to be built into any healing procedure to help somebody really make changes that will remain.
Mhm.
Nothing is a straight line.
So for hypnosis to be mostly effective, you have to be somewhat open to the idea or receptive to it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, most people who come in wanting that have already dealt with
Tried
that issue.
everything. Yeah, they've tried everything there is.
Yeah, yeah.
Did people have to do multiple sessions or were you able to work magic in the first session?
Well, I mean, occasionally that'll happen, but that doesn't typically happen. The people will start out, sometimes they need help along the way. Once you get to a point where you can see rhythm going on, you can say, okay, we can space these things out, and that's the best way to go because you don't want somebody to have to lean on you every time something goes wrong. You want to have to build, you want those structures built in to their own experience, so they now have enough choices to be able to cope with the difficulties and understand that their resilience is now built into their consciousness so they can deal with this.
So
Yeah.
you're like in some way you're embedding subliminal data or information into them that will always be that quiet whisper in the background guiding their choices.
Yes. And because I have audio material too that goes along with it, that'll always reinforce what happens in the office.
Mhm.
So there'll always be something there that will allow them to connect with that which helped them get started and reinforce them continue.
Is this I don't know about Manhattan. I haven't really heard about it too much where I am out in Calgary. Is this a popular area for helping people with weight loss? Are there many people doing it?
Well, it's a big city, so there are all kinds of programs going on in hospitals and clinics and individuals. Right. I mean, the culture is big right now, so
Yeah.
there are a lot of people looking for help, and it's so critically important because so many degenerative diseases are built on being too big. So many things are going on. We all know that. So This is not just an aesthetic thing. This is a serious issue having to do with your health ongoing. And because all of these things that are degenerative diseases are now starting much earlier.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing. So this is something everybody should be paying attention to with, as we talked about at the beginning, sleep being the linchpin to the whole thing.
Well, using as many tools as you can, as many, which brings us back to the hypnosis and your app, which is why I wanted to talk about this. I noticed listening to some of your stories in the app, and obviously it's intentional, that it starts off with you telling a tale or scenario, and then all of a sudden a second voice either underlaps or overlaps. That's part
Mhm.
of the hypnosis, like that was intentional.
Yes, because when what I learned about hypnosis is that you can do pleasant overload.
Mm.
And I remember going to a workshop where two hypnotists work with one subject, speaking simultaneously. And those of us who were there for the workshop, all of us, while we were listening to two different trains of thought being spoken, everybody kind of went into this trance state, not being able to follow everything. And that's when I had the idea, well, why don't I do this with audio material and be able to effortlessly put somebody into a trance state and then structure the materials in such a way that messages can be formed and processed outside of awareness because you can be responsive to stuff without knowing it. And plus, it's a great stress management tool.
So
So
one voice is a bit louder and stronger, and then the other voice is a bit softer and quieter, and they're not like they're more so flowing, I found through each other. If
well,
I
usually the double storytelling is pretty much comparable in terms of volume,
Yeah.
right? And the stories kind of weave together in ways that allow messages to be formed. And most of the time, you have no idea what's happening because you've drifted away into what's known as the hypnagogic state, the state between waking and sleep, which ironically, since we're only there most nights when we drift off to sleep for a handful of seconds, these this audio technology allows you to stay in that state for an extended period of time. That means you're receptive to information for 15 minutes as the two stories are going. So all kinds of information can be processed without you knowing it and then influence you at certain key moments in time when you're back in the world.
Yeah.
It's a good product and
Where
very
it is, and I still want to continue talking about it a bit, but what's the best way to use it? Would it be before bed, or would it be when you're just going through your daily tasks with some headphones on?
probably the best time would be a time when you would normally take a break in the middle of the afternoon, right? Everybody, if you can, 25 minutes or something like that. That's how it's like people would take naps at certain times, right? If you have a structure where you can do that. If not, you can listen while you are going to sleep. But the probability is because sleep will be the primary need, then halfway through, you'll drift off and go to sleep. Up until then, though, the programs have been useful. So it all depends on the structure of your life and how you can fit it in so it doesn't disrupt anything.
I'm sure we've all seen, and I am cognizant of time, so we'll wrap up soon, but I'm sure we've all seen in old TV shows and sitcoms where someone will put on a tape player and headphones and they'll go to bed. I think it was an episode of Friends or something. They go to bed and it's on repeat all night and supposedly brainwashing them. Does that work? Is that the same idea?
You're going to pick up certain things that are in the tape if you're listening to it while you're asleep because you're still processing. But while you're asleep, you're not processing it quite the same way you are when you're in the hypnagogic state, the in-between state. That's where the magic occurs. When you're fully asleep, your brain is focused mostly on sleep and
Yeah.
doing all the tasks it needs to do. Will some of that somehow leak through? Probably, but unless it's really distressful or something like that, I don't think it might influence some dreams and stuff. But other than that, I don't think people have much to worry about with that.
So the app is a very interesting app. I'm looking at it now. Like it's really interesting. It's hard to describe. Someone would have to go look at it. So you have all these different categories, and of course I was drawn to the health and fitness one first.
Mhm.
And you have then four tracks in there. So the first one I picked was the motivation. I was like, oh, I'm interested to hear how he's motivating people. And it was not what I thought I
Mhm.
was going to get. I thought it was going to be all that motivational speak. You can do anything you put your mind to, but it was completely different and caught me off guard.
It's meant to be subtle. It's meant to get you into a relaxed state. It wants your state of consciousness to change. We don't want you all hyped up and all of that kind of stuff because for most people, that's not going to be the factor that's going to change what goes on. It's going to be something being presented in a way that impacts them without them knowing that it's been impacted by something. It's wanting to change thought patterns.
Mm.
So you create messages and suggestions in ways that allow people to process it in an altered state of consciousness, which then will hopefully show up at certain times and places or with certain people so that they can make choices that are different from the ones that they're currently making in their day-to-day experience.
Yeah, I really like it. It's very interesting app. And like I said, it's hard to describe. You have to go in and download and check it out. And I like the daily focus as well. Just
That's
three.
a different thing altogether. That's meant to be focused on consciously. I
Mm,
mean, the app is about lifestyle intelligence, and it's called Lifestyle Intelligence LQ, and it focuses on eating, sleeping, and moving, the three core elements, which is our core intelligence. We take care of ourselves and really treat ourselves well, we can function at optimal levels emotionally and cognitively. So every day, I give you a 3-minute intellectually focused bit of information that you can think about during the day and hopefully utilize in your life. The audio material that we've been talking about, this hypnoperipheral processing, the HPP programs with the storytelling, that's the second part of it to be done at certain times so that your entire brain has an opportunity to be utilized. Not just the listening part that is learning information and making choices in the real world. That part gets 3 minutes a day. The rest of you gets the audio material that's meant to relax you and then reprogram some portions of your life so you can make much better choices for yourself.
yeah, I do the list. I do my best listening and learning first thing in the morning, usually between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. And then after that, my focus shifts to something else. So I've been doing the 3 minutes has been now included in everything else in my morning routine. I really, really like it. It's a it's a very smart idea.
I appreciate that. Thank you. If people are interested, the website is Lifestyle Intelligence LQ, all one word, small letters, and .com, and it'll show up, and I'll give you more information because there's a little video of me talking. And if you're interested, there's 2 weeks use for free, so you can test it out and see whether it's useful or not.
Well, it's
This
quite
way, people,
affordable as well,
yeah,
regardless, because
yeah.
if it changes lives, it's almost priceless. But guys, you can also get it in the Android store and Apple store and everything.
Just Apple,
This
not
Apple,
Android.
I got
Yeah.
mine in Apple.
Okay.
So, Dr. Lloyd, another great conversation. Thank
The
you.
same, I enjoyed it, and hopefully sometime in the future we
Yeah,
can meet again and talk about some stuff and then old stuff and then some new stuff, and we'll
yeah.
just keep doing
We'll see where AI has us at that stage.
it. Indeed, indeed. My pleasure being here.
Well, thank you again. Have a great evening.
You too. Take care.